Please go ahead and start, Jeff.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Good morning, members of council. Thank you very much for this opportunity to present to you the progress on our housing strategy. My name is Jeff Humble. I'm the manager of land use planning. I report to Bob Bjorky, and I'm responsible basically for policy planning and heritage and housing. So today you're going to hear a presentation from Bindu Shah. Bindu's been the lead on our housing strategy, as well as Marilla, who is going to talk about a number of initiatives that we're working on relating to the strategy. There's been an incredible amount of work on the strategy that's occurred since the spring, and we're advancing forward to bring this strategy forward potentially for adoption in the first quarter of 2021. There's been a lot of ongoing engagement. We've been meeting on a weekly basis with the Region of Peel, developers, as well as various departments in the city. We have Madison Van West from the region who's available to answer questions. And we're looking forward to basically getting the input from council. As we proceed to the public engagement, we have your perspective and input. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Bindu. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Good morning, members of council and residents watching online. I'll first present an overview of Brampton's housing data, then an update on the overall strategy work, and then we will follow with some key initiatives that are ongoing. As Jeff said, my colleague Mirella, who is leading the student housing and lodging houses reviews, will then provide an update on those important initiatives. And at the end, we will talk about the timelines, next steps, and the short-term kind of commitments for the next 2 years. What I've thought about is we'll pause at the end of every segment and address any questions for clarifications that you may have on that particular segment. And at the end of the presentation, we can have time for more fulsome discussions. I would also like to thank Madison from the region for being here. This presentation and our contact information has been posted online in case you have any further input after this session. So as we know, preparing an affordable housing strategy is a term of council priority. Brampton has already initiated and completed many early deliverables of the strategy. We are now nearing the end of the analysis stage and are preparing a draft report with policy and action items for consideration. This analysis has been based on Brampton's needs and addresses the mandate of the strategy. And the mandate is to focus on facilitating the creation of affordable housing and also improving housing affordability and choice. And the result that we would like is affordability in all contexts, be it greenfield, intensification, mixed use. I'd also like to add that this work is by regional and provincial legislation, provincial policy statement 2020, recent updates to the growth plan, the ongoing work on the Peel 2041 plus plan, the region's growth management and major transit station. And we also
now joining.
Peel intensification and market demand analysis, etc. The strategy is also mindful of ongoing city initiatives such as planning for the Heritage Heights Secondary Plan and the various large-scale development applications that we have received recently for review. Last, the main lens is affordability and fulfilling a made in Brampton approach for our strategy. By definition, what does affordable housing mean? Affordable housing is a housing where a family does not have to spend more than 30% of their gross household income on shelter costs, be it rental or ownership housing, and this is for low and medium income households. Now, this 30% cap is called a threshold for that particular income group, which we will see in the next slides. A term that is often referred to is housing continuum, which you can see on the bottom of the slide. That means a spectrum of options from available to residents, from emergency shelters to market home ownership. And the far side, there are people who are in crisis or without a permanent residence. And then there are people who are paying their own rent with assistance. And finally, there are independent renters and homeowners. Many people think that the term affordable housing refers only to rental housing that is subsidized by the government. In reality, it's a very broad term that can include housing provided by the private sector, the public sector, non-for-profit sectors, and it also includes all forms of tenure, rental ownership, even cooperative ownership, as well as temporary and permanent housing. Next, we can look at the regional and municipal roles for housing and how they align with each other. As the service manager for social housing in Peel, the region manages social housing programs with Peel Living and other housing providers and private landlords. The region's roles are mostly in providing system planning management, administering the centralized wait list for subsidies. It also invests in and grows a supply of affordable housing. It has a private stock strategy, which provides assistance to second units and upgrading those second units to legal standards, court standards. And it also administers funding for providers. It has a whole array of policies, regional official plan, housing strategy, housing master plan, Peel housing and homelessness plan. This figure on the right is from the PHHP, and you can see there are multiple targets that the region is hoping for. So that is the region's role. And the role of the city here, Brampton can kind of influence the provision of housing that is affordable to residents through mainly policy planning, financial and non-financial incentives to market developers, and some managing processes such as the second unit registration program, and using planning tools such as CIPs and CPPS to provide incentives. So these are the two roles, the region and the city, and how they align with each other. This slide, we speak about income thresholds that we spoke about earlier in slide 3. So here's a snapshot of what affordability means for households in various income ranges, which are called deciles. So as you can see, the first row shows you gross ownership household income, and the 1 to 9 are the groups, the income deciles. So it can be said that the bolded area and highlighted area in red shows you, for example, the 6th decile. Gross household income is 110,000, and so what it means is that this household category can afford no more than this much, 423,000, on their cost of housing, which translates to a monthly spending of 2,700. So that is how thresholds and income deciles are referred to. The same holds true for rental affordability thresholds, and the average market rent in Peel is derived to be 1,418. So if you can see, these threshold numbers change every year. The ownership threshold has jumped by 32% in 10 years, and the rental threshold has increased by 35%. And the region monitors these numbers every year, and they prepare a monitoring report for us. Here we look at data on tenures in Brampton. This chart looks into and divides all the owner households per each income decile with the total number of owner households in Brampton. And the same would be for renters in a different color. One takeaway from here is that a good proportion of renter households also belong to the medium income and some even higher income deciles. This chart looks into and divides the number of owners in each decile by the total number of households within that decile, and the same for renters. For example, if you look at decile 1, 44% of all the households that belong to that decile own, and 56% of them rent. And the same for each decile after that. This chart gives you a cross-reference within Peel and how Brampton stands. This data is the most recent and shared by the region. Looking at Brampton, only 5% of Brampton's housing stock is apartments. 13% is townhouses, and majority is singles and semis. But if you look at affordability, only 8% of the townhouses in Brampton are affordable, whereas 91% of the apartments are. And in Mississauga, 20% of the stock is apartments, but only 68% of these are affordable. You will note that throughout the region, singles and semis are not considered affordable to lower and medium income groups. This slide shows that although 91% of Brampton's apartments are considered affordable, they are mostly 1 and 2 bedroom units. The bottom slide shows that. The townhouses in Brampton, you will see, are mostly 3 bedroom units. Recently, we have been seeing applications with typologies of townhouses that are smaller. They are stacked, they are back to back, and they have 2 bedrooms, but that number is very small. Brampton's housing needs assessment, which was prepared in 2018, indicated that there is a need for larger apartments. In terms of condominium units, which are eventually rented out, it's a similar story. Mostly smaller units are found there. And the chart there shows rental housing trends in Brampton. Over the last few years, there has been little supply of purpose-built rental apartments. But there's a huge jump in permitted second units, and mostly due to the success of the second unit registration program. That program came into effect in 2015. We thank the region for working with us to prepare Brampton-specific housing data and these slides. Before we move on to the next segment on the city's housing strategy, are there any questions on this segment for clarification? If not, I will move on. So this slide shows the initiatives that have been completed in terms of housing. The city has been diligently working on a number of housing-related tasks and policy initiatives. And these are some of the early deliverables of the housing strategy, such as the needs assessment, senior study, group home study. I will mention 2 items from this list. For the housing strategy, a public engagement took place in late 2019. We received feedback on various issues around housing and innovative housing solutions, and we have incorporated these suggestions into our draft strategy policies. The second item is the draft policies and action items document, which is here in the bottom. This document lists all the possible options for Brampton to include in the housing strategy. So a total of 31 policies have been reviewed. Each policy can be achieved by different actions. And so we prepared a very detailed list of around 130 such action items to choose our focus areas from. And this also explains to us the work that will be needed to fulfill that policy and the partnerships that will be required with different stakeholders. And this document forms the basis of our next steps in consultation and finalization of the strategy. This chart shows ongoing initiatives around housing, and we shall review a few of these in detail in the next few slides. But here I'd like to highlight 2 initiatives. The development review housing input. We are looking closely at the unit mix and unit sizes that the market is providing in all our development applications that are high density. And we are encouraging developers to provide a much more balanced mix with more 2 and 3 bedroom units rather than mostly 1 bedroom units that we've been getting. Second, that I would like to talk about is the Brampton Housing Advisory Committee. It is an active group that advises on our initiatives. The committee is comprised of stakeholders from diverse backgrounds, the region, the industry, non-for-profits, and community organizations. In the next 3 slides, I will speak to some key policy themes that will be addressed in the housing strategy. The strategy has 4 themes. Each theme includes policy groupings. The list is not exhaustive over here. The report I mentioned earlier includes the entire list, but here we have just highlighted the key ones here. The first one is theme one, which is improving the supply of affordable and rental housing, we can do that through various policy means. The land supply is critical, how to increase the supply of land that is suitable for the development of affordable housing. Second one is planning policies, which is kind of where the biggest impact can be had. Those policies and tools such as inclusionary zoning, planning for housing in the transit-oriented developments, and of course, official plan policies, zoning bylaws, rental conversion policies, pre-zoning. Those are some of the policy areas that we will be looking into. Third is appropriate financial tools that can incentivize the type of housing that Brampton wants. The incentives can be in the form of DCs, capital grants, tax increment grants, and fee rebates. And the last is the development review process improvements. For specific applications that depend on external or provincial funding, they have tight funding deadlines, and the development review process we feel can be modified to help the applicants meet these funding deadlines. And in this aspect, we have listed all the possible improvements or modifications that can happen to these processes. The second theme is improving housing diversity, because Brampton lacks the full spectrum of housing options. And we can do that through various approaches, including through design. Through the Brampton 2040 work, we hope to develop a policy framework around intensification, not just high density towers, but also low and medium scale of densities, and where can these be located and how these can interact with our existing low density residential neighborhoods. So that's the first thing we would like to look at. And we also need to provide for an increased range of family-friendly, age-friendly, safe housing choices for singles, students, and in apartment forms, we need to be a little bit more creative in how we approach flexibility and aging in place. A very critical theme for Brampton is engagement and advocacy. A communications and outreach approach with residents. This was suggested through our Brampton Housing Advisory Committee. This can include engagement around housing diversity and understanding of what different kinds of intensification and densities mean, what are the benefits, pros and cons, and maybe more public input can be encouraged prior to the statutory public meetings, etc. The last theme includes developing annual targets and performance indicators, having an idea of how much of a change we want to see every year from the current situation, what are our targets and goals, and then keeping track of how our final selected policies are actually making a difference on the ground. So we can do so by developing good databases. We can also think of a regular housing conditions report. Maybe that will be something that council would like to see every year or like an annual basis. Here's something about a new typology of housing that we will need to look at, and this stems from Bill 108. The bill basically directs official plan policies that allow for 2 additional units in each single semi or townhouse lot. So that means that in addition to the main principal house itself, an additional 2 units will be allowed, one in the principal dwelling, such as the basement unit or second unit, and also one outside, like in the backyard, along the lane, if there's a lane. These usually are called coach houses. There are various possibilities over the garage, standalone unit, or you can convert a detached garage. In various other areas, these are some of the approaches that have been taken. Brampton needs to figure out what is best for Brampton and how and where do we, if at all, include this in our housing scenario. So the top right figure shows the various forms of these units. This is from Ottawa. Ottawa has been doing this even before Bill 108. The top left figure and the bottom left one show laneway units either on their own or above a garage. And the bottom right photograph shows a tiny home in the backyard. Often these are modular units and they are just hooked up to your services. The intent is affordable housing. This can also address aging in place, multi-generational housing, etc. Municipalities like Ottawa, Markham, Hamilton were already allowing these in certain areas. Windsor just approved an official plan amendment to this effect, and Hamilton is now looking to see if there is public interest in expanding the scope citywide. Brampton does not have a lot of laneways. Moreover, servicing and parking will be additional considerations. A preliminary review of our current zones shows that not all the zones have the lot sizes or the dimensions that can support this, but definitely new applications, new greenfield subdivisions can propose the required lot sizes and the lane-based lotting that can accommodate these units. Through the public engagement in 2019 and also through the strategy research work, we have seen that many innovative approaches to housing can help fill the affordability gap. Here are a few of the options that are listed in our policy options report. To your top left is a layout of an apartment. It's called a flexible layout, and it includes a lock-off unit, which is shown in light gray here. It has its own entrance door, washroom, small pantry. There's also a connecting door with the rest of the apartment. This can really help teenagers, seniors, students live on their own. If they choose, they can connect to the house. The option of renting this portion of the apartment now suddenly makes it affordable to many households. Like owning an apartment is also giving them a renter income. We will be looking into the legalities around this and if it works within the purview of the Planning Act and the Condominium Act. But this is a good option that's been implemented in some areas in Canada. The top right shows another flexible home ownership option. This is from a live application that is right now has been received by the city of Hamilton. The developer is proposing options to the buyers on purchasing bays rather than a fixed size apartment. So I don't know if you can read, but this here is a typical 1-bay unit. You can purchase 1-bay units or 2 bays or 3 bays or 4 bays, depending on your family size and needs. Each bay is a parcel, so then you are actually purchasing parcels. And depending on your needs, you can later downsize by selling 1 bay out of your 2 or add 1 or 2 bays if you need to expand. Now, this company, JVN, expects that home ownership is possible through this for households earning as less as $30,000 a year. And they also offer down payment assistance, creative ownership options, like you can purchase a unit with your family and friends. And sweat equity options, meaning you can purchase a partially unfinished unit for a lower price and then do some of the construction yourself. Or you can live and rent unit options like buy a unit, divide it, live in half and rent out the other half. Or you can go with alternate unit layouts depending on your needs. There is also unit flexibility. And we think that this is something worth looking into and investigating. To your bottom left here, this is a picture of smaller modular housing units. Modular housing can also be in the form of apartments. These are small houses like in row houses, but not really attached. And the bottom right picture is of prefab units to house the homeless, possibly on public-owned lands. These kind of tiny homes are also becoming popular, and tiny home communities are popping up all over the world. But cities usually look at their zoning bylaws and start with a small pilot project, like introduce one zone in one area that allows smaller lot sizes and see what the uptake is. The top left picture on this slide is of, it's called Smart House. It's Toronto's first micro condo development. It's 25 stories, situated at one of the most expensive intersections in downtown. But they have very tiny units. They are beginning at like 275 square feet and increase in size, but mostly they are the same size. What they do is deliver like a really affordable option for singles that want to live there but can't afford a unit like that. And at the bottom, you'll see an example of the size of a micro unit, 10 feet by 30 feet. The middle left is not really an innovative housing, but I just added it here because we need to kind of look at these older typologies. They are called fourplexes. We have duplex, triplex, fourplex that were very popular earlier. Now they are getting more attention. Basically, it means that you are providing like 4 ownership houses within one house form. And so it's gentle density. Cities are now adding these within their single family zones at appropriate locations to increase the density with minimum impact on the neighborhood. Some cities are allowing residents to convert their existing single houses into duplexes. Like you can have one on top of the other, 2 ownership units, not rental, and you can have side-by-side duplex, which is the picture on the right. So it was one lot, and they chose to have rebuilt as 2 units on one lot. So it's 2 ownership units. It's called a side-by-side duplex. Without going through a severance application. So the zoning has to support this. Top right is a picture of Toronto's RAC zone, residential commercial zone. It allows ground floor areas, levels of their towers and apartments to have small scale retail and community uses, and also temporary little markets on the weekends. So this new zone changed the rules in like 500 tower sites, allowing for food markets, small businesses, classes, community services, and other initiatives. Housing affordability, as they explain, also includes ease of accessing such services and not having to spend a lot of money on transportation. So these are some of the ideas that we have tried to look at and incorporate in our policy options report. Before we move on to the next segment on specific incentives initiatives, are there any questions for clarification?
Hi, Councillor Santos. Sorry. Thank you. Sorry, I just a question, and I brought this up at the region as well when they brought forward a report on their housing master plan, affordable housing master plan at the region. I think it's great, some of these creative ideas and innovations that we're looking at. I'm just, like I said at the region, when we're talking about affordable housing, there's something around the language with respect to quality affordable housing that's super important. So I'm sure you guys are considering it, but if you could just share briefly how you're dealing with the quality aspect of the applications that come forward. And then secondly, because of Councillor Willens and his leadership on the Community Energy and Emissions Reduction Plan, can you also talk about how building these sorts of affordable, higher density intensification housing is so important in terms of our greenhouse gas emissions?
Yes, for sure. So I'll start with the applications and quality of design. One of the policies within the options document also speaks to that. We need to prepare good communication material to explain the type of application details and the quality that we would like. Some cities are being very proactive. They have like all kinds of videos on how to prepare your application and package together and what are we really looking for. But also in terms of giving more input as to what do we really look for in terms of design. So one section of this includes a lot of design guideline work for all kinds of housing typologies, even for subdivisions, infill housing, how to address context sensitive housing when you're proposing a new application, subdivision design guidelines for affordable townhouses, stacked townhouses, apartments. Code approval is also important, so there can be communication on that. And we don't really have, so we are working on that, but there can be more amenity area design guidelines and policies for family-friendly housing. So these are some of the things that we can, as a city, help the development industry with, so that when they come in, they know exactly what we are looking for and how best to apply with a full and like a fulsome application. Does that answer your first question?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, in terms of sustainability, we have like 4 or 5 areas that we have listed in that options report. We want to plan for sustainability of these residential developments to not just ensure affordability, but also address climate change impacts. So first is developing policies and programs that support urban renewal of existing neighborhoods. Second is improve the energy efficiency of older multi-unit residential developments. Maybe we can have a pilot program approach where we promote sustainable retrofitting of older towers or residential areas. We can also incorporate very comprehensive climate change mitigation policies in the official plan with respect to neighborhood planning, subdivision design also. And I know that our SERP has a lot of good language around that. We can also develop policies that facilitate the retrofit and reuse of heritage properties, and we can reuse them as affordable and seniors housing. That's also reducing the impact, and it is considered sustainable to reuse existing building stock. So those are some of the areas we are looking into right now.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So if there are no more questions, I can move on to the next part of this presentation. So we are going to be looking at 5 detailed initiatives. The first initiative we will discuss today is the incentives pilot program for purpose-built rental housing. This is an initiative under the Peel Housing and Homelessness Plan 2018 to 2028, and it is prepared in collaboration with the region, the local municipalities, and support from a consultant, NBLC. The program design was endorsed by the Regional Council on July 9, 2020. This program seeks to provide middle-income affordable rental housing with a focus on larger family-size units that we normally don't obtain through the market. So these units, affordable units that receive incentives, must remain affordable for a minimum of 25 years. Regional staff are right now working on implementation. Brampton is supporting that work, and the targeted launch of this program is 2021. The region has prepared, and we finalized a list of required criteria for applications to meet when they approach for these incentives. There are some of the required criteria are over here, and the criteria on the right side column are preferred criteria. So this is to kind of support rental housing for middle income. And why middle income? And rental, because the vacancy rate for rental apartments is under 1% in P, indicating very little availability for households seeking rental accommodation. The region will provide capital grants to successful projects. They're saying that the unit mix should include a high number of large apartments. A financial analysis called the subsidy gap to deliver affordable housing also showed that the subsidy gap is less for rental developments, and hence it's easier to incentivize this. This will be a competitive process, so applications from all the 3 municipalities will reach the region. There will be a roll call once every year, and developments that comply with the required criteria will be looked at, but those developments that fulfill the preferred criteria will be scored higher through the scoring process. What else? Affordable rental thresholds must relate to the percentage required for middle income groups. That number includes monthly shelter costs, meaning the gross monthly rent. It includes heat, hydro, and hot water, and does not include parking and internet or cable charges. The building must also be entirely operated as rental. Private or non-for-profit developers may apply. In the preferred criteria, if you are promoting deeper affordability or you are providing longer duration of affordability, also there are certain locational criteria, like if your development is near transit amenities, growth areas, areas of housing need, and if you have more amenities on site, those are the criteria that will be scored higher. Value for money analysis just means that if the developer is putting in, like, let's say $3 and the region is providing $1, that's considered more value for analysis than the region bearing the larger share of it. The following are examples of additional incentives. So the city has an option of adding city incentives on top of what the region will be providing as incentives, because it's a pilot program, and the subsidy gap for housing is such that no matter if you have one set of incentives, you'll still fall short. So each municipality has the option to add a stacking incentive on top of it. And these are some of the options that Brampton has to look at and may consider as the program is implemented. You can provide relief of fees, development charges for just the affordable portion of the development, property tax, tax increment grants. You can provide land, reduce parking ratio. You can fast check the approvals or provide your own capital grants to match it. So in the future, we might have to decide if we want to join the 2021 program. We will have to think of what we want to provide in terms of stacking, if at all. So that was the first initiative that we are working on with the region. The second one is inclusionary zoning. This is for affordable ownership as well as rental developments, and it's for market housing. So this is a planning tool, inclusionary zoning. It's a way to make sure that affordable housing gets built in a way that, you know, it promotes socioeconomically diverse neighborhoods. It works by requiring the developers to include a certain portion of below market units, either to buy or sell in every residential building of a certain size in a certain location. And the planning framework, Bill 108, scoped the use of inclusionary zoning to areas within major transit station areas and community planning permit areas. So right now, Brampton and the region are looking into the boundaries of these MTSAs. The region of Peel is working with all the 3 municipalities again for this program and with the consultant to develop the framework for an IZ. So right now what is going on is a municipal assessment report is being prepared by the consultant and analysis is going on. So the technical analysis has included select test sites in all the 3 municipalities to determine the most appropriate form of IZ. And what it will lead to is there'll be direction coming out of this assessment that we can include in developing official plan policies. And some of the considerations are the current housing supply in each municipality, the housing need, depth of affordability, and tenure. What this will lead to is it can increase a city's stock of affordable housing, especially in intensification areas or transit-oriented areas. And inclusionary zoning policies normally have enabled this in markets where such housing would not normally have been developed, which is primarily high growth areas. And this also helps to overcome local opposition to affordable housing. It helps to offset high housing costs to lower income consumers. And it of course helps to promote diverse communities where households with a wide range of incomes can all live together. So this shows you the potential MTSA areas, just to understand that this policy will help create affordable housing in all these areas should we finalize those in Brampton. So right now we have provided 4 test sites to the consultant, 1 in Uptown, 2 in downtown, 1 in Mount Pleasant, and the analysis is ongoing at the moment. The third initiative here is how best to use public land for affordable housing. It looks at some of the ways the city can utilize their own land or school board lands or regional lands. The region has a policy on this. It's called the first way of. There are many ways of achieving this that the city can look into. The first and kind of the easiest way would be to have a policy called a housing priority policy. Sometimes it's called housing first policy, where when a city wants to acquire or dispose of, lease, or redevelop its own public land, then housing is the first priority for which to do that. Several municipalities in Ontario and across Canada have adopted these policies. And in some cases, land is made available below market rates, but in others, it has been made available as a disposition preference at market value. Brampton's real estate policies and procedure bylaws can address the sale of surplus city lands, and staff suggests policies place explicit priority on surplus properties for affordable housing. Another way of doing this is the city can set up an affordable housing reserve fund, and all net proceeds from the disposal of any surplus lands specifically and any other funding available through other programs can be deposited in this fund and can be used for promoting affordable housing in other locations. Pre-zoning city lands is also one more way to ensure that the lands are later used for affordable housing and supportive housing or rental housing purposes. A good example, a best practice here is a municipal development corporation called for Toronto Creato, and it's in charge of managing its real estate along with, and it's put up more than 50 properties for development since its creation. There's a program called Housing Now, which provides market and affordable rental housing with a mix of unit types and sizes on their surplus properties, especially near transit nodes. And it is a very long-winded approach. It's taken them years. They pre-plan sites, rezoning approvals are completed, and then the developer steps in, and the developer basically then just has to apply for a site plan and get going and start building. This is an example, and certain other places like London has a very good program, and they have a municipal housing development corporation. So the next two initiatives will be presented by Mirella. And before we move on, are there any questions for this segment of my presentation? Mirella, I will hand it over to you.
Okay,
and you can share your screen.
Do you mind?
Oh, sure, I can do that. Yeah, okay.
Okay. Thank you, Bindu. Okay, so as Bindu had mentioned, one of the other initiatives that we're reviewing is the lodging house review. So basically, we'll go to the next slide. I'm assuming everyone can hear me okay. And so just guessing the definition of lodging house is basically it's contained within a single detached dwelling, and it consists of more than 4 units, lodging units within the dwelling itself, but they do not have access to all habitable areas of the dwelling unit. So this kind of gives you a sample of, we currently have some quick facts. We currently have 13 licensed lodging houses with the city at this time. And the chart on the right gives you an idea of the number of complaints received to date. So we kind of did an analysis from 2015 to 2020. So as of to date, in 2020, we received right now 444 complaints as of last week. And it's also interesting to note that the number of complaints you've seen an increase in 2019 from 2015, 11.5 times more complaints that we've received and are dealing with on a regular basis. Next slide, please. So this kind of gives you an overview of basically our official plan, basically supporting the zoning direction in terms of permitting lodging houses in certain residential districts. So basically, the chart on the right indicates the parent zones in the zoning bylaw where lodging houses are currently permitted, but we mainly find them. The 13 that are in existence within the city are mainly within the downtown area and have been there for quite a long time. There are certain also, besides being in a single detached dwelling, other provisions include a separation distance of 305 meters between lodging houses, and then there are other requirements to fulfill. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to kind of give you a perspective on where the complaints are coming in. So this map illustrates in 2017, a heat map of where the main complaints were centered around, kind of along within the south part of Brampton, kind of the central part and towards the west. And then you see other growth patterns happening around the east side of Brampton. Next slide, please. and then looking at the 2018 lodging house complaints that we received. So kind of shows those areas kind of basically expanding within growth in terms of complaints received to date. So we're actually working with our GIS department now just to kind of get an updated map for 2019, and then we'll continually see the targeted areas of growth and expansion. Next slide, please. So what other municipalities are doing? So we're kind of doing right now the initial review. So we're looking at different municipalities within the GTA. And so basically Toronto, they've introduced a multi-tenant lodging house definition. So basically kind of complying with the number of units being 4 or more, similar to our approach in compliance with the building and fire code. And they also target lodging houses to be permitted in certain areas of the city. So they have to comply with that, and then they're renewed on an annual basis. They take the approach that a lodging house is an option to provide affordable housing for a variety of different individuals. So it could be people looking for single room accommodations. It could be students, seniors, new immigrants, and people of low to moderate income. Next slide, please. Waterloo has taken a more aggressive approach. They basically license all low-rise rental units. So they have a system where they have different categories. And so each rental unit must be licensed with their department. And they do a risk-based audits that are conducted on a regular basis based on complaints. They started the program back in 2012 and have basically they came and spoke to us, and it's, noted that it does take quite a bit of resources to amp up a program such as theirs that license all rental units. But they found that within 5 years, they were able to recoup the costs, and the number of complaints has dropped significantly during that time frame. Oshawa has taken the approach. They do also license lodging houses. So they do throughout the city. And then they also, next slide, please, target specific areas, which would be looking at a residential rental housing bylaw that looks basically around the central area around Durham College and the Ontario Tech University. So they basically require that all rental housing, no matter how many units, should be licensed within that specific area. And they also have a demerit point system. So I guess if there's any violations, they'll start tracking the point system with the violations. And then after that, they can revoke licenses. And they do require an annual inspection and licensing. Next slide, please. Mississauga they take the approach similar to our approach, where they license lodging houses, and they do it on an annual basis, and it's renewed and inspected, and they pay an annual fee, similar to our approach. Next slide, please. Barrie has a different approach. They break it down into 2 categories. So they'll permit smaller lodging houses, not more than 6 units, 6 tenants, in all residential zones of the city. But then they also take a different approach with the larger ones that are more than 6, permitting in certain areas of the city, certain zones. And they also do a targeted enforcement and inspection around Georgian College between August and April to coincide with the school year. Next slide, please. And Guelph has, their approach is basically, they do have 2 different lodging house types themselves. The second type being more focused within townhouse development and apartment buildings that are basically catered to these lodging house units. They permit it in certain residential and certain R1 zone and the commercial zone, CBD, but they're not, they allow a maximum of 12 lodgers, and they request that individuals basically apply for certification. So it's not licensed, it's not renewed annually. And they do have a program, the city does have a program, they're more being proactive enforcement, and they do work with the university, and they have a representative at the university. So if they've received quite a bit of complaints regarding a particular lodging house, the university will work with the tenants of that lodging house and with the city to kind of resolve it. So they recommend that, so that way they can promote it as a safe lodging house unit, and they also have a separation distance. Next slide, please. And Edmonton is similar to our approach in Toronto's and others that they just basically require a rental accommodation business licensing program, and it's done on an annual basis where people register their lodging house. So that kind of just gives you, so again, we just started our initial review of the lodging house review, and we're looking at the target areas and to kind of get input on the best approach. So we'll be working with an internal steering committee and then launch out stakeholder consultation. Next slide, please. We also want to be mindful of the Ontario Human Rights Commission. And in terms of that, lodging houses, similar to Toronto's approach and other municipalities, that they see that as an option, if done correctly, to satisfy the need of affordable housing for the individuals that are not able to afford renting regular market rental units, and it provides a single accommodation and making it more available again to senior students and people of lower income. They also recommend, if possible, basing the bedroom cap on health and safety, so complying with the building and fire code to protect the occupants within that dwelling unit. Next slide, please. And this gives you, again, just a general overview of our project timeline. So right now, we're just basically, again, reviewing the best practices. We will move forward to contacting various municipalities to kind of engage with them to see what are their successes and challenges with their approach in terms of regulating lodging houses, and kind of get input on the best approach for the city, considering it is more of a citywide problem that we're experiencing. And some areas do have higher concentrations, but not necessarily just around post-secondary institutions. And then once we conduct our stakeholder engagement piece, then we'll move forward with the preferred options and then report back to council to have some further input. And we'll move forward to the next slide. I guess if there's any questions or comments regarding the lodging house review, just to get some general input if you have any. Okay, I don't see any questions coming in, so I guess we can move forward to the next initiative that we're working on. So we're also working on the student housing review. Next slide, please. And this is a partnership that we're building with the various institutions within the city of Brampton. So we've already made connections with Sheridan, Algoma, Ryerson, and Trials College. But it's interesting to note that there are 47 private colleges located within Brampton as of 2019. But these also include smaller private colleges, could be like trucking companies that may only have less than 10 individuals enrolled at one time. It could also be esthetician schools, etc. So we started that discussion back last year in the late quarter of 2019, meeting with the major players and just kind of getting some input of their concerns and to see how we can move forward with addressing any issues that they're currently facing, that the city is facing itself. Next slide, please. What is student housing? So basically, just to kind of give you a definition of a lodging house. Student housing means it's basically a residential unit owned by a participating nonprofit entity that is basically used for individuals that are enrolled at the public college, private university, and private college. Next slide, please. So I thought it would just be interesting to kind of highlight the student housing problem within all of Canada. So basically we've noted, there was an article that was published and it noted that the number of foreign students was just over 435,000 at the end of 2018. So this article was published in 2019 of October. And that was a growth of 119% between 2010 and 2017. They found that the report found as little as 3% of Canadian universities, basically the students themselves reside in purpose-built student housing outside off campus, and that Canada itself is 10 to 15 years behind other countries in terms of developing off-campus student housing. So it's a real problem that we need to look into across the country. Next slide, please. And so we thought it would just be kind of interesting to note, to kind of give you the perspective of where the 47 colleges, private and public universities and institutions were located in relationship to that illegal lodging house complaint that was the map that I had shown from 2018. So this kind of gives you a perspective of where the hotspots are in relationship to the institutions themselves. Next slide, please. Thanks. So as we were going through our research in the Ontario Professional Planners Institute, their journal that they publish on a regular basis, from Q2 2020, they noted about, they gave Brampton's demographics because Staff Can actually started tracking population growth rates within local municipalities. So it kind of gave an interesting perspective. So it gave a growth of, basically Brampton experienced a growth of approximately 79,000 people within the last 3 years, that the majority of them being within the city of Brampton. And it was interesting to note out of that 79,000, that 17,000 was natural. It was just basically a population increase. It was natural. And then 18,000 was of international students migrating to the Brampton area to attend the local institutions. And they were non-permanent residents. And then basically also the article noted that during the same 3 years of adding approximately 80,000 people, we've actually constructed less than 13,000 new housing units were constructed within that same time frame. So the question was basically, as everyone knows, where is the housing for the individuals that are coming into the city themselves? Next slide, please. So I just kind of wanted to recap. We just kind of gave, this slide just basically shows what's making headlines, and everyone knows the important key here in terms of developing any provisions or regulations is maintaining public health and safety, for not just for students, but for other individuals themselves too, to prevent any disasters that might happen within the city because of being non-regulated. Next slide, please. I was also, we came across an article that was posted back in April of 2020 regarding the impact of COVID on post-secondary institutions. So they've noted that there would be a significant loss at that time, and they projected it being about $66 billion for all Canadian colleges and universities in their annual school budget that would be experienced over this coming year because of the COVID situation. And also that Canada's response, the government's response, was that based on the input that they received from post-secondary institutions, was to make it possible, excuse me, for students outside the country to register and study online. And that the government took the approach to is that any time spent online, if you're doing post-secondary graduate work, would count towards your work permit, earning the credits that you need, and to basically account for the permanent residency as part of the program that they have. Next slide, please. So what others are doing. So we kind of just did a preliminary review of other municipalities and their approach to dealing with student housing. So Toronto has their Toronto Home Share program, and I know this is something that we probably would also consider working with the post-secondary institutions. So basically matching up students that are looking for accommodations with individuals that are over 55 years of age that may have extra room in their house, and that would kind of satisfy some of the need and build that relationship where the individual can help the owner of the home with either paying an additional rent or helping them out around the house with different tasks. Kingston, they looked at the approach that they were going to develop more purpose-built rentals, similar to what we're looking at too, and to increase the supply of affordable housing units through available capital funding programs that are available, and also looking at preserving the stock of rental housing that's currently in existence from preventing it to go into condo conversions. Barrie is also looking at privately owned student housing, so designating certain areas for that type of use. St. Catharines is looking at, again, they have a licensing program of residential rental units, but they've also have established a formal town and gown committee to work with the city and the university and various stakeholders in the community to address any issues that are coming up. Oshawa seems to take a little bit more of a more aggressive, forward approach. They've looked at amending their official plan and zoning to allow for opportunities in target key areas to permit townhouse and apartment developments to cater to that need. They also used their community improvement plan the initiatives, incentives there to promote this type of housing for students. And they've approved 7 applications using that type of incentive funding. They also have development charge exemption, and they're also looking at reestablishing their town and gown to strengthen communication amongst interested groups. Waterloo itself, again, they have their robust program in terms of licensing for all residential low rental units, and they also have a town and gown committee. Next slide, please. So as I had mentioned before, we started the consultation with the post-secondary institutions late last year in Q4 2019, and I've actually moved it forward to this year as we started. So we've had that dialogue. There was interest in working on establishing a working group, and we would be doing that within Q4 of this year. And basically we'll look at developing a mission statement or vision and developing key initiatives that the city along with the post-secondary institution, should be focusing on. And then that would lead us kind of more into a few action items that would help us establish, if required, any policies related to student housing within our OP and our zoning to permit that type of use and to deal with that issue within the city itself. I'm not sure if there's any questions regarding that initial work that we've done to date.
Yes, I had a question. I don't know if it showed up there on the chat.
Oh, sorry, no, it didn't for me. Sorry, I didn't catch it.
Oh, sorry.
Here we go. Let me just bring it up now. Okay, okay. Go ahead, Councillor Bowman.
Okay, thank you. What is the current legal provincial statute on universities and colleges' obligations for housing?
I'd have to look into that. I will look into that. I'm not sure in terms of the exact. Are you referring to like the exact numbers or how many of their student population they're required to house?
No, what I'm referring to is, say, for every 100 international students that enroll in a college or university, the law says that they are responsible for housing 50% of them, for example.
Okay, I'll have to look into that. I don't know offhand. I'm not like through my discussions, I haven't, and through my initial research, I haven't come across that, but I will look into that definitely.
Okay, I'm pretty sure it's 0, but anyways, when we're working with the Sheridan colleges of the world and these other groups, Councillor Medeiros and I both sat or did sit or currently sitting, I'm not 100% sure, on the Sheridan's Town and Gown Committee. We had our first meeting back in the last term of council, and I believe we've had 2 meetings total. It's unbelievable to me that we've got a problem like we do here in the city, and Sheridan is the only one that's established a Town and Gown Committee, but yet still we've only had 2 meetings with them. So I think that has to be resurrected. I think this is a major problem that we've gone. This is not just about, conversing with international students and telling them, what's expected as a resident of Brampton. This is about solving a crisis that we have here now. So I'm hoping you guys can get involved in that as well and get them back to the table on that committee. And Councillor Medeiros can add any comments he's got about that as well. One of the important things I've got is, how can the city of Brampton compete with slumlords who will charge, 15 students $500 cash for a mattress on the floor, even if we have an adequate supply of affordable housing, where the affordable rate, according to our first charts, is about $1,400 to $1,600 a month. How are we ever going to compete when we've still got that going on?
Okay.
We can build 10,000 affordable housing units and hope that we can dedicate 2,000-3,000 of them to international students or to newcomers. But as long as we've got the slumlords out there who are willing to take cash under the table, at below average, but just have more people living in the same house, we're not solving any issue at all there.
Right. No, I do appreciate that comment. It's a complex issue, especially when, like you said, they're taking money just under the table and housing these individuals at a very low cost. I'm hoping that through our lodging house review and also looking at, in terms of some of the other municipalities, the way they've targeted certain geographic zones, maybe, like I said, I will need input from bylaw enforcement and property standards in terms of, their input on the best approach. But, they've targeted certain areas to be very aggressive in going after the legal lodging houses. Or units such as that. So, I mean, I know I do appreciate your comments in terms of, I did go to Sheridan College's housing fair, and, we do provide them with education pieces in terms of finding safe second units, basement apartments, what to look for. But again, like you said, if they don't have the money and it's not, they're not able to afford it, they will end up in those unsafe conditions. So that is we do appreciate that's a very complex problem. So we're working, I'm hoping that through this working group, which will have Sheridan, but the other players too, that hopefully we'll be able to move forward with some of the initiatives and meet on a more regular basis than with Sheridan. Because Sheridan's at the board, they want to meet, but I'm not sure if it's going to be formed as a formal town and gown with all the institutions, but that's something we can definitely look at.
Okay, and final question. We've got, well, counting Sheridan, I guess we've got 50, if I'm not mistaken, accredited institutions that are capable of bringing in international students in this city. Right. Are the smaller medics and guys like that, are they providing us with numbers of international students that are actually here going to their facilities?
We have some preliminary numbers. We started contacting them, but I'll have to follow up with them in terms of the number of international students. So we did start, one of my colleagues did start a database with that information to see what their student enrollment in and what their student enrollment is and what they anticipate is coming from international students. So we are working on that. But like I said, we have to kind of go further into it. We just initially started contacting all of them.
Okay, and are we also getting numbers, if they're available, from York and Humber, where, the international students may be living in Brampton and just commuting there every day? Do they know where their students are living, or can they give us any sort of indication how many?
Yes, I did contact York, Ryerson. I have contacted the local post-secondary institutions. A few of them have responded and provided me with information, and basically, I guess, of the students enrolled that have a Brampton address. They have provided me that information, but I haven't got it from all of them. So I was contacting also the other local colleges too, like Humber and Seneca, just to see who resides in Brampton and is commuting out. We also, I did find out information about the shuttle service that was being, that was mentioned before, about students being transported to other institutions outside the city that live within Brampton. So I'll follow up with them. With the COVID situation, a lot of it, I did get some response, but not the entire, all the emails that I sent out. I haven't received everyone coming in with their numbers, but I'm hoping that within the next time frame, that like within the next several months, I'll be able to collect all that data to provide a better picture of what we're looking at. And like you said, to make other people more accountable, right, to see what we can do.
Right. Okay,
but I
thank you.
Appreciate the input. Thank you very much.
Marilla,
Councilor
Medeiros
I think
has a
you
question.
Did you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, and I think Councillor Bowman did an excellent job really capturing, I guess, all the sort of angles of this issue, especially around the 50 accredited institutions right here in Brampton. And one thing you might want to connect with, and I know Mayor Brown did a good job raising this at the region, and the region shared with us some of the contingency plans that the institutions had if some of their students had COVID and how they're dealing with COVID. So I know, for example, Sheridan, Algoma, the major institutions, but we know nothing about the small institutions. And it speaks to the fact, and I know there's a lot of different issues here, and we're specifically talking about housing and so on. But I think also to understand in relation to a COVID world, there has to be sort of some understanding in contact with these institutions, especially these sort of smaller ones, and how are they supporting their students from a housing perspective. Are they, for example, do the students know their rights? Are they, where are they directing the students? It'd be interesting to find out, especially, or do they just allow them to go wherever they want? Another sort of angle to all this is, I guess, the whole real estate agents and the real estate board and all this other stuff. So I don't know how we're consulting with them as well. And I don't know in terms of professional due diligence, what their responsibilities are when they, for example, put something up for sale, what they're selling to, what the intent is. I don't know. Again, I know that's sort of a little bit out of our scope, and but what's their sort of role in all this? And I can tell you just experientially, I dealt with a neighbor who just sold, and now I have renters beside me myself, and so and that's fine, but that seems to be the trend around, and it just seems very fishy when someone pays top dollar to rent where it's just not a property that you'd want to rent. So you think that there's a lot of safe havens happening, but the real estate agents, I just find the lack of transparency in terms of the sort of their on some of the sort of business dealings that they're promoting. Because I've been to sort of meetings, I've been called into meetings unaware where the whole idea of the real estate agent was, if I buy this home, can I do 3 or 4 apartments in there, or this agent wants. So I find that this seems to be market driven as well. And notwithstanding, a lot of these people who are owning these homes don't even live in Brampton, or not even, they might be even overseas. So I know these are a host of issues to deal with, and we only got a slice of the pie, but, it's just the more you sort of dive into these issues, it becomes almost like quicksand. It just seems, we're swimming here trying to find on one end, housing affordable options and so on. And then it's being undermined by a sort of a black market, which is really compromising our ability to, services and so on. But what really sort of gets my goat with all of this is you have the federal government who provides and gives these student permits, student visas, and they issue them. And then you have the province who accredits these sort of private career colleges, and a lot of them are suspect to be the best. And all this impact, we're the ones in our community dealing with the impact and all its form, be it financial and so on. So it's just, when you sort of look at all the pieces, it just seems we're the ones holding the bag. Residents are looking towards us for answers, and we're swimming above water trying to just put out fires and do our best within the situation. But that, and from a long-term perspective, we can't just continue to do what we're doing. And just the last comment on the town and gowns, I almost felt the town and gown was given to us as a forum to deal with the situation. I almost felt it was a way to shut us up, because we had 1 or 2 meetings and nothing came about it. So, Keith, so I'm glad to know that you're going to be involving with the institutions and working with them. But I don't know if it's something that we want to drive and just, form our own sort of ongoing committee and be a little bit more proactive in engaging with, especially these smaller institutions, to really develop a housing strategy that works, especially for the community. Because right now you're having an exodus, and that's sort of I think the biggest sort of thing that all of us are noticing as councillors. You have an exodus of homeowners, people who've lived here their whole lives in Brampton, who just are fed up and don't want to choose to stay here, and they're just leaving the city. And you see this consistently. And, I just feel from an overall level, there's impacts, and it just seems we're in a downward trend here. And, it's just, so I know this a lot. I know it's a lot of it doesn't have to do with today, but it's just to, I think this issue has a lot more sort of impacts around it. Anyway, sorry for that. I know
I appreciate it.
And I'm venting almost as well, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
No, I appreciate your input. I know when I was first given the project, you kind of look at it and you're like, okay, how complex can it be? But you do realize, even through just my review with short-term rental accommodations, that itself also, and layering back all the layers and how it's all related to market-driven forces and how the city can actually control that when it's outside our control, basically. Because like you said, the real estate agents are promoting properties as investment properties. So I'm hoping that through, the short-term rental accommodation work, introducing a business licensing bylaw and limiting it to the principal residence, could help with that. Help with that issue in terms of limiting, like avoiding those investment properties, but also looking at then working with the institutions to kind of see what other measures we can put in place. And then also, even with the lodging house review, I did receive in the past several people coming and asking inquiries of what when they could, if they could open a lodging house at a particular property, but of course they weren't permitted because it wasn't permitted in the zoning or anything else. So I'm hoping that through all 3-4 reviews we'll be able to come up with some, be proactive and come up with some sort of solutions that would help not eliminate the problem, but reduce it significantly at least. But I appreciate your input, and I'll try to get in touch with someone from the real estate board just to kind of have their perspective on it also. I think that would be helpful too. Thank you very much for your comments. I guess, I saw Councillor, I don't know if it was Councillor Santos first that had a question or comment.
Yep, I have a question comment now in follow-up to my colleagues Bowman and Medeiros. Councillor Vicente and I, just as early as last night, got a complaint, which is actually now all over Punjabi media, related to a lodging house in Ravenscliffe, Parquet, and some of the staff will know that we did a sort of walking town hall with the residents there, and apparently there was a illegal lodging house on that neighborhood street, 25 international students urinating on the sides of the house and partying all night, something along those lines. And I think about these sorts of things and issues and how we are trying to address the longer term affordable housing plan. But we do have to address, as Councillor Medeiros has said, some of the immediate issues at the moment. These universities, these post-secondary institutions make a lot of money off of international students with respect to the tuition fees that they pay, regardless of whether they go to Humber or Guelph or Ryerson or York or Sheridan or Trios College, which is a private institution. They make a lot of money. And Councillor Bowman and I, at AMO, as everyone knows, we have been advocating to increase the heads to beds levy. And I think the bylaw was just recently passed with no increase at this time. But even if we tried to push for an increase to a cost of living for that levy, it's still a drop in the bucket in terms of the revenue that we would be getting as a city relative to the amount of negative impact and issues that we have to deal with our infrastructure and complaints from residents. And so as we're working with these post-secondary institutions, like we need to remind them how much money they're making off of these international students, and they need to be coughing up some money to help us develop some affordable housing. I will say that the Brampton U model, in terms of the financial model, and this what makes it very special, is that with that financial model, the city is investing into the Brampton U model, and the Brampton U model would be a creation of the city, which would then be incentivized and would be required to reinvest into student affordable housing. And that is something that is very different from existing post-secondary institutions who are attracting international students over tens of thousands of dollars into their pocket that never comes back to the city. So while we're looking at this plan to develop student housing, we need to seriously consider and look at how much money these institutions are making off of the backs of international students who are overcrowding in houses in the city of Brampton. And so those are just my comments, and just make sure we keep that in mind when we're talking to them.
Okay. No, thank you, Councillor Santos. Councillor Fortini?
Yes, thank you, and good morning, everyone. So my concern is, I know we're talking about licensing how many people can live in these places. If we can't control what's going on now with these basements, what makes us going to be controlling how many people could live in a place with a bylaw? Because the court system, it takes forever. Even now, when we go to these illegal basements, they don't let us in. We have to go back and forth. And then to take them to court takes over a year and a half. So licensing, bylaw is all good, but if we can't act on it, it's like, it doesn't make sense. That's how I feel. So we have to, unless we have a protocol that is fast, then it's a different story. But if it's not, it's the same as these illegal basements. We're not going to be solving more the issues. We're just going to cause more problems. I know in my area, we call and bylaw goes over. They don't get to go inside the home. Then they got to issue an order. It goes back and forth, and then say, "Well, we got to take them to court." And it goes a year and a half. So it wasted a lot of time and effort for everyone. But we don't solve the problem, you know. So doing this bylaw will it solve that problem now that we could go in there quick and say, you know what, you only allow 4 people on your licensing, you got 7. What will it happen, or do we take the license away and it becomes illegal again? So what can we do to make that faster?
Okay, well, again, we can look through that. We can review that when we're reviewing, again, the other measures that we're putting in place, or like I said, our current lodging house program, licensing program, and then also we can evaluate that to see what works better. And then also with any other programs that we're doing with involving licensing or registration.
Okay, I just, it's like our basement apartments. There'll be so many people registering. They're not going to register, I have a feeling, because, you know, everyone's taking that $600, $700, $800 per room cash. Why would I register? And again, you know, like we put a bylaw, we say, okay, you're allowed 4 people or 5 people. You got 8 in there. How do we know if there's 8 people there? At the end, they're going to say, there's only 4. We're not allowed to enter. I don't know how we're going to control it. Or how do we know how many people's in a home? We won't be able to know. So even though I have a license and I say I'm allowed 4 people in my home and I got 9 in there, what makes us give us that evidence there's 9 people compared to my license I have 4? That's where the hard questions are all going to be.
Right.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Are there any other questions coming in? Anyone else have any questions or comments? Okay, I don't see any other ones coming in. I do appreciate everyone's comments. Regarding
taxes and leave that stuff in my office. You want to come?
Oh.
Yeah, it won't be long.
Councillor Medeiros.
Councillor Medeiros, you're off mute.
I've muted him.
Okay, no, thank you. So we'll be reviewing these projects and again updating you on a more regular basis in terms of how far we're coming along and the approach that we're taking, just to continually get input. And like I said, we'll be working with the post-secondary institutions to see how we can, move forward on these matters that are quite complex. And like I said, as noted before, beyond the city's control in terms of, number of people coming in, how much they're being rented for, and these illegal lodging houses and other student accommodations. Is there, I guess that wraps up my portion of the presentation. I guess I'll hand it back over to Bindu to finish off if there's no further questions. Oh, actually, sorry about that. Virtual engagement, both myself and Bindu will be focusing our efforts in the coming Q4 end of this year and early next year on engagement. We'll be doing a number of online surveys and virtual sessions with various stakeholders. So we'll keep you in tune with that. Thank you very much. And I'll hand it over to Bindu.
Thank you, Mirella. So this is 1 or 2 slides here. This is about timelines for the overall high-level housing strategy that we spoke about. So the timelines are, we want to go in quarter 2021 with public meeting. We incorporate the feedback and then have a strategy ready for council endorsement. And after that, we have kind of identified the items that we will prioritize for the next 1 or 2 years implementation, short term and then long term. The implementation tools will be here as discussed here, any required amendments to the current OP, or we plug into the Brampton 2040 plan that the work is going on right now, or the zoning bylaw, design guidelines, process improvements. So these are some of the deliverables of the housing strategy. In terms of the priority action items for the next 1 or 2 years, we are already working on many of these. So we plan to bring them to completion. Like Mirella explained, the lodging houses, student housing timeline, she's already spoken about. So these policies and improvements, this is the timeline for the implementation of the first phase. This is draft. Depending on the stakeholder engagement, we might add a couple more here, but in our minds, this gives us most value, most impact for it. And these are our key contacts here. Please contact us for any input. We will be before council in the new year with a report on Brampton's first housing strategy. I think if anybody has any questions, we can take them, or this concludes at least my portion of the presentation. Thank you very much.
I think there was a question of Councillor Bowman.
Yes, thank you very much. I just wanted to add a couple of comments on the entire project. And I thank Councillor Medeiros for his passion when he was speaking about this as well. Do we know what the average family size in Brampton is? Is it like 4.6 or something like that? We're one of the highest in Canada, are we not?
Yes, it's 3.7, I believe.
What was that? Sorry?
3.7. Yeah.
3.7.
Yeah, we've kind of broken it down into typologies, but that's the average.
Okay, and what's the Canadian average?
We are higher than the Canadian average for sure. Canadian is 2.7, I think. I'm not 100% sure. Sorry, I can put it up.
No, and that's no problem, Banu. That's my question. I mean, we're looking at this, and we already know we're 8 to 10 years behind in what we need to do, but I'm certain we've always, for the past 10 years, had a higher average family size than the rest of Canada. Yes. So when we're talking about affordable units in the 1 and 2 bedroom size, when you have a family that on average is 4, if you've got a mom and a dad, say, or a couple, and they've got a male and a female child, I mean, you're already looking at a 3 bedroom right there. So yeah. We need to start stressing that option as well. And as far as the communication piece goes, I've always wondered this, and I've said it before. In theme number 3 at the beginning of the presentation, we talked about engagement.
Yes.
And we engage neighborhoods when we're going to have a brand new development in there. So if we're putting anywhere, say 94 townhouses in a neighborhood, we have a public consultation period, statutory public meeting. But we're talking about adding the same number of people, maybe even more, in a neighborhood in basement apartments, or according to Bill 108, in outside units. And we don't consult with the neighbors at all as to what they want. And I'm just wondering, what is the difference? I mean, you put a development on a piece of vacant land that may not be close to somebody's house, but they still object to it. Or you put 7 or 8 people living beside them, expanding the driveways, garbage all over the place, and we just go ahead and allow it without any consultation from these people at all. And Councillor Medeiros is 100% right. We have community groups forming right now that are mad as hell about this. And they're going to be coming to council, and they're going to be delegating, and they've got every right to be upset, because in some cases, we're doubling the intensity of neighborhoods. Very few neighborhoods around Sheridan College and have single family dwellings anymore. And that's what they were zoned for. So I'm just wondering, when are we going to start engaging with communities and say, you know what, in your neighborhood, we've already got 100 registered units. So what do you think about that? Should we allow more? Should we cut down on it? Perhaps this engagement should be part of the overall planning and consultation strategy that we do, because I can give you at least 4 to 6 groups that are already formed that want to have input onto this.
Thank you. That's great input. I personally have, through my research, found that approvals of basement second units, lodging houses, in some provinces, they go through the proper planning process, just like any other development application. And then the neighborhood is notified, they have a say, and then a decision is taken. So I look into the Planning Act and what are the legislation around that. Thank you so much.
Okay, that's great. And just a couple more things, Banu. And believe me, Banu, these aren't directed at you. They're directed at the whole Brampton housing strategy and the planning. So we need to look at what are we doing about our vets. Councillor Willens and I brought Henry Verscheren into last term of council, and we were talking about the homeless vets. And they were talking about micro housing, and I believe we did it again at the beginning of this council. We came in and talked about micro housing, but we still don't have anything in the works yet for that. So are we including in affordable housing the need for our vets in Brampton?
Yes, we can include. Right now, like, we don't have the view, but we be including all kinds of housing for all groups. So I'll make a note here to include that. We were thinking of like a pilot program for modular housing, like take a site, be it a public land or any other site, maybe a regional site, and look at the zoning provisions for such a program. So I'll keep that in mind. Thank you.
Yeah, and I believe Councillor Willens and I had Thomas Fisher come in not too long ago. Okay. He used to be with Habitat, but he's now working for a company that builds and dismantles housing, modular housing. Yes. So if we can get in touch with him again. And sure. Finally, I just wanted to touch on the equality issue. And I hope Councillor Medeiros supports me on this, because I haven't really asked him about it before I bring this up. But in Ward 3, we have areas that are in tremendous need, and Beno, I know you know some of them. Townhouse Crescent, McCarty Court, Orenda Road, the Rutherford High Rise, John Street, Queen Street past 410, Chamney Court. In Ward 4, we've got the entire Sheridan area. We've got the Surlew Conover development. And I don't think, maybe I'm wrong, I don't think any other ward has as many of these developments as Ward 3 and 4 do. So, you know, if we're talking about a strategy, we also need to be looking at including all other areas in this city for low income and affordable housing units, because grouping them all in 1 or 2 wards, I don't think is an effective policy, and it has not worked for this city yet.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. We'll make a note of it. Not sure how to address it at the moment, but definitely we'll have a look.
Okay, and that is it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think Councillor Williams had your hand up for a question.
Yes, I do. Thank you. Such great points and comments being made by my councillor colleagues. This is an extremely complex matter, and Binu and Marilla, thank you, and the team, thank you for putting this together. It really kind of adds some needed information and understanding. Just a few things while I was listening. You know, we know that it's a business, especially with regards to student housing and rentals. It's a business, and you know, the real estate board, as Councillor Medeiros brought up, they do play a role in it. You see many houses that go up for sale and they have income property, and if you talk to BREB, they say, well, that person is not registered with us, they're registered with TREB. And then, but TREB, to hold people accountable around it, it just takes so long. because TREB is a much larger base. And if you have a TREB license, you can sell houses anywhere in Brampton. So, when we look at this from a business perspective, I just wonder if there's any consultation being done with the economic development team with regards to how, the industry is impacted by some of the policy changes, and if there are any significant suggestions. And because I know you work closely together, but I just wonder from a business lens, if there is some pieces that we could be exploring. Has that been considered or not?
Yes, Councillor. We have a internal stakeholder engagement happening starting from next week, and for the next 2 months, that's all we're going to be doing, focusing on internal and external stakeholders and their input while we prepare for the eventual public surveys and engagement. So a lot of these input will happen, and we will be receiving comments from each of these divisions.
Okay, great. So, and I just wondering around, I really like the idea about the development application and some of these houses going through that process. I'm excited to see what that is going to look like. And also with Councillor Bowman brought up some good points around family sizes, and we are clearly higher than the average. I'm just curious to know though, how many families actually, when you look at the number of families that have kids, I guess you can take my family for example. If you go about 10-15 years down the road, if everyone is living in my house, hopefully they might have moved on, they might have 5 cars. They have 5 kids, there could be 5 cars. I'm just wondering the percentage of families like that where you have kids coming back into the home, all driving vehicles, and compared to the more of the rentals where you have different units contributing to that. Because I know in bylaw there's the parking issue is a big one. So I'm just wondering if you have that comparison, or if you know those numbers around who is an actual family, what is an actual rental.
We have those numbers, but broken down by deciles. So I can compile a consolidated version and we can send it out for people to review.
Okay, thanks. Because I just wonder if sometimes that perspective is helpful for us, because we sometimes think there's a lot of cars there's a lot of people in that house, they have to be a rental, but that might not be the case. And that also is why sometimes we have difficulty with getting out the message that we can't, there is nothing to follow through on with a bylaw, and that whole investigative process, because it's a family, but you still have the same issues going on. So I'm just wondering if that information is helpful. But overall, I think this is a big issue, and it's definitely in many cases it can be solved on a higher level than at the city, with the courts, with province, and so I'm looking forward to hearing what comes out of some of these consultations and what the overall plan is. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. We have a hand up from Councillor Fortini.
Yes. Thank you. I forgot when I talked last. So I'm going to give you an example. On my street, at the corner of Bramalea and Goodwood, they built a nice, beautiful home. And the Region Appeal couldn't hook up the meter because it's got a 3/4 inch pipe, which was stamped from the city. They said 1 inch. When we look at these homes, and I got my sprinklers now, if I turn them on now, they won't go more than 10 feet because there's no water pressure. So they have to come in at 4 o'clock in the morning when people are sleeping. What are we going to do when we do this and all the drains and a lot of these roads like mine, and I know a lot of places like Balmoral, South of Queen, Peel Village, which they don't have sanitary sewers and storm sewers, and they only have a 12-inch pipe, and then they get flooded and it goes into people's homes. Have we looked at the infrastructure? Because the region actually paid people to take your downspouts out so you get the water onto your lawn. It doesn't go into the drains because we can't handle all the water. We talk about driveways, don't widen it because it doesn't handle all the water. But meanwhile, when you start having 8 people in a home, now if it's one family, that's fine. Like we can't tell people you're not allowed to have your kids. But if we start renting, how is our infrastructure going to be able to hold all that, all the drains and all the water pressure, and then it backs into people's homes.
Councillor Frattini, thank you for the comment. We can certainly take that for consideration and review that with our Public Works Department as part of our internal engagement as well. So we can certainly raise that issue and take a closer look at it.
Well, because, I feel bad for my neighbor who lived behind me for 20 years, buys a home which was a grow-up, builds a nice home on the corner, and the city ran him through the ropes because he's got 4 people living in the home. You need a certain size sewer, certain size water capacity, 3/4 inch. It costs him like almost $30,000 extra, and it's him and his wife with 3 kids. And meanwhile, here we are, we're putting 8 people inside the home, a 1,300 square feet like mine, because it's got 4 bedrooms, and our sewers can't handle. I only have 1 sewer on my street. I don't have storm and sanitary. So what happens when I put the camera in there and I got a 12-inch pipe, and it floods all the waters in the morning, people take a shower, and if they can't, and if we have a rainstorm and they can't hold, and it backs up into my house, and it's only me and my wife, that's not fair for also. So we got to look at the infrastructure. We have to do something. And a lot of places like Balmoral, even Peel Village and south of Queen Street, they're on a floodplain. So because what happens is the way the sewers are connected, it just backs into their houses, into their basements. So that's one thing we have to look through the planning too. We can't have every area saying it's okay. It doesn't matter where you live. We have to pinpoint where those floodplains are, where they have the old sewers with a 10-inch pipe on the road. They don't have storm and sanitary sewers, and they only have a 1/2-inch water pipe going into the home. Because if I take a shower at 7 o'clock in the morning, I barely get any pressure for me even to take a shower, because everyone now uses the water between 6:30 and 8:30 in the morning to get ready for work. And where I live, we're all like single family dwelling. There's no rooming house here. Now you imagine having 3 or 4 rooming houses here, and the water keeps going. The water capacity is not there, and the sewer line's not there. So please, we got to look into that too. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment, and we will definitely include that in our list of issues to address with the other internal departments. And perhaps that's one of the aspects to consider as part of our licensing, certainly for lodging houses. Okay, great. So I see we're a little bit over time. It's 10 after. We're certainly staff available to stay longer. Are there any other questions or comments from council?
So Jeff,
No.
it's Peter.
So I
Go
want to
ahead,
thank you very much. As you can see, there's been a lot of work. Bindu and Marilla have been working on this, as I say, for quite a number of months, and the work is going to continue until next year and beyond. So please feel free to reach out to Bindu, Marilla, myself, or Bob if you have any questions going forward. We are going to continue with engagement internally, and then the external stakeholders as well. And our aim is to get some more detailed information to council in the coming months. So happy to discuss with you further, and thanks again for participating today. It's been very great to get your comments. Thank you.
So thank you, Jeff. Members of council, if you wish to stay for a few minutes, what I'd like to do is close the workshop by just providing a few-minute overview of eScribe, which is our new cloud-based agenda and meeting management system.
So I guess this concludes our session. Have a great day, everybody.
So Jeff, we're not finished the workshop
Multiple
yet.
people are now exiting.
So members of council and other staff that are wish to stay, you're welcome to stay. I'm just going to spend a few minutes just to go over the eScribe portal that the city has implemented as of last week, and then talk about the So members of council, can you still hear me? It's Peter. My button's on, yeah. I don't have to use the headset. Members of council, it's Peter. Can you just want to confirm that you can still hear me? Council, it's Peter. Can you hear me okay?
Hi, Peter. Are we still doing the e-scribe thing?
Yes, we are. We're just having a few technical difficulties with the microphone. So I hope everyone can see the screen. Can I just have the sound in the chambers turned down or off, please? So I'm using my headset. So just a moment, members of council. Can members hear me now? So my mic is off. Go to the three dots here. Just a few other things to point out with our new portal. You have a link to the live stream. Because we do allow for limited public attendance, if the public do want to attend a meeting, they can request to attend a meeting, and this will take you to a web form that persons will fill out. And finally, if you want to look at the year at a glance for the calendar, for the meetings, you can click there. And if you want to go back and look at meetings, agendas, minutes, prior to October 1st, 2020, and for previous years going back to, I believe it's 2009, 2008, you can click on that link and it will take you back to our site. Also, the latest video from last week's Committee of Council is posted there. So that's a very quick overview of the actual new portal website for public access for members to access. But something I do want to introduce to you now is with the eScribe application, members of council are considered participants. And with participants, you have special access through an app for meeting information. So the first thing I'm just going to show you is if you go to the App Store for Microsoft, I'm just going to type in eScribe. And you will see an app pop up. And in particular, there's an app called eScribe Meetings Professional. As part of the implementation of this software package for meeting and agenda management, there are 15 licenses we have, one for each member of council. I will send you the details right after this workshop. You can download the app now to your iPad. I will send you the URL to link into, and then the sign-in is just your normal sign-in as if you would sign in every morning on your city-issued computer device. So with that app loaded, what you will see is the Professional Meetings app. And this is a quick overview of the app itself. So at the top left, you'll see an announcement screen, which we'll be able to put some announcements in. I just want to confirm members can still hear me.
Yep.
I see something, I hear something playing in the background. I'm not sure what that is. Okay. Over on the right, there are some resources. So you'll see a link to the procedure bylaw. You can click on that and the procedure bylaw opens for your reference during a meeting, and as well the code of conduct. The bottom half is the actual meetings. So the meetings that we've posted on the public portal are also available here to you as participants. So if I just look at upcoming meetings, we have the meeting of the Committee of Adjustment tomorrow. We're just finishing the meeting of the council workshop, so that's why it doesn't show up first. But if I go to the special meeting that we looked at on the public portal on Wednesday, it does open information. So on the left-hand side, you will see information about the meeting, the agenda itself. And again, with the same paperclip, you will see a staff report. On the right, you will see information if there is a meeting-specific announcement. There is none for this meeting in this sample. You will see the list of attendees. And we have not put pictures of members in, but senior staff and members of council are listed there. And if there's any other site-specific documents to be loaded. What you can see is if we click on that same report, the first thing that shows up is we have put in the system the actual resolutions, the recommendations as they are right now, proposed recommendations for consideration at this meeting for this particular report. And if you want to see the actual report itself, there is a paperclip here, and you can open the report and you see the same list of attachments and the report as I showed you in the public version. The report itself will open. It is a PDF. And then the nice thing about this application, if you wish, and some members do use this already, is they annotate their agendas for their own notes, their own comments, things like that. And there is an annotation feature on the right-hand side. The first button here is sort of a display large button, and then you can start to annotate specific aspects of a report. And you can change the color however you see fit. You can add comments, you can add a note, you can do free-form text. And there are other things you can do. You can see all the changes that you've made. You can turn off the changes if you wish. You can look at all the bookmarks. You can search for material. You can copy material. You can save it to the server and it'll be saved as your copy for access later. And you can print or email material if you see fit to do that. So it is quite versatile in terms of having actually, immediate access to the reports. So members of council, that's a very quick summary of the eScribe app and portal. I'm cognizant of your time. So you will be receiving an email from me immediately after this workshop with the name of the app to download from the App Store to your iPad device, and I understand all members of council do have an iPad. I also will send you the URL, and I also will send you the instructions for logging in, which is just your normal password. Just to let you know some things that we are looking to roll out. As I mentioned at the beginning, in terms of the video links, the integration of video, that will be rolling out October 14th. We're hoping in October that we will start to roll out closed session access to members of council through this app for your closed session materials, instead of the traditional way we've been sending it out to members of council as a shared PDF. We also are looking into eScribe has a lot of functionality. We are looking at what's called a vote manager and request to speak system, particularly in this environment of remote meetings. We do know that there are a number of municipalities that are using those features as well, and we are looking into those. I will conclude by saying that for members of regional council, I think the 7 members, eScribe has been rolled out at the Region of Peel. It's also been rolled out at the City of Mississauga. So I'm hoping some of these features are things that you're familiar with right now. There is so much more to eScribe, and particularly to this app, in terms of being able to customize the information that's important to you from each of the agendas, and save the information and share the information. And we'll be rolling that out over the coming months as we continue our implementation of the eScribe meeting and agenda management system. I don't know if members have any comments, and sorry for the technical details or issues at the beginning of this session, but I am mindful of your time. And if there are no questions, I'm just looking in the chat function and I don't see any hands up. So members of council, thank you then for attending. Oh, we do have one question, sorry. I don't see it, sorry. Councillor Santos, no?
No, but I think it's really cool.
Okay, thank you. So members of council, thank you for joining us this morning for today's workshop, and you will see an email from me shortly with the link for the app and to download it to your iPad. Have a great day. And the live stream will be ending momentarily.